As I mentioned at the very beginning of Mass, today we celebrate the second Sunday of Easter, also known as Divine Mercy Sunday. I'll say a little something about that in a bit. Today is also the last day, the 8th day, the last of the first 8 days of the Easter season. You know, Easter for us Catholics is not just a day, it's not just Easter Sunday. That is the first day of a 50-day long season, which ends with the celebration of Pentecost. But these first 8 days, beginning with last Sunday and ending today, are celebrated as if they were one continuous day. Throughout these 8 days, there is a little response that we repeat every day, which says, and I'm sure you've heard this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad. Hallelujah. Now, that day that is referred to is not a 24-hour day. It is the eternal day that the resurrection of Christ has procured for all of us. And that is where Jesus, this risen Jesus, that is still alive and is still active in our lives, that is the day, that is the reality that he is calling all of us to more and more step into, to go where he leads. And the resurrection is all about going where we have never been before. It's important that we understand this concept. You know, in the Gospels, if you read through the Gospels, there are 3 people in the Gospels that Jesus brings back to life after, they've been pronounced dead. His friend Lazarus is one of them. The 12-year-old daughter of Jairus, who was the head of the synagogue, is another. And then there was the son of a widow. The guy was on the way to the graveyard to being buried. And Jesus brings him back to life. He brings all 3 back to life. But let me show you the difference between those events and the resurrection. You know, Lazarus, Jairus' daughter, and the son of the widow, they were alive and they were here. And they died. And they came here. And Jesus brought them back to life. He brought them over here, brought them back here. Listen, eventually they had to go there again, okay? They were revived. This is not what the resurrection was. Here's what happens with the resurrection. Jesus was alive. Jesus died. He came over here. And when he resurrected, he didn't go back there. He was no dummy, okay? He came over here where no human being had ever been. And he unlocked this path, the path to this eternal playground that we all long for so much in our lives. And he went where no one had been. And this is where he calls us to be. Gradually, after we pass through our moment of death, we will be there fully. But in order to embrace what each one of us most deeply longs for in our soul, we cannot arrive at any of it unless we are willing to go, to be led by Jesus where we have never been. And that is exemplified in the gospel this Sunday. We're very familiar with this gospel and this account of Thomas the apostle. Jesus, of course, appears to his apostles on the evening of Easter Sunday. They freak out because they really don't recognize him. They think he's a ghost. Eventually he convinces them that it's me, right? And of course Thomas was not present, as we well know. When the apostles relate to Thomas that they had seen Jesus, Thomas doesn't believe that, and he says, forget it. Unless right? I stick my fingers in his wounds, I won't believe it. Those are Thomas's category. That's his shtick. Well, you know, this risen Jesus, by the way, who is very playful, okay, appears a week later on this evening, and he invites Thomas. He meets Thomas where he's at. You notice, he says, okay, this is what you need to believe. Get over here. Stick your fingers in here. But then notice that he calls Thomas to leave behind his categories, his shtick. He calls him to step forward in faith, as he calls everyone that he appears to in his risen state. He calls them to go in their minds, in their lives, where they have never been. And the Lord does the same to us. This risen Lord appears to us in very sneaky ways. Quite often, like all those people that encountered him, we don't recognize him. But the invitation is always the same, to go where he leads. And he doesn't lead us usually to our own categories or our own shtick, but to where he knows there is new life. Today, as I mentioned at the beginning of Mass, we rejoice in 17 parishioners of ours who are going to take on a new encounter with Christ, right? This is what divine mercy is all about. What the Lord is doing for them is what the Lord did for Thomas and everyone that he appeared to. Gave them a second, third, fourth, 651st new chance, a chance at new life. Divine mercy is all about the outpouring of God's love, a love that he gives us not to return to what we're used to, but to return to new turf in our minds, in our hearts, and in our lives. And these 17 candidates from our parish who have already been baptized, these 17 candidates are going to encounter Christ in a new way as they receive the sacrament of confirmation, and also as at this Mass, they make their first Holy Communion. Those that are going to, the couple that is going to enter into sacramental marriage is going to encounter Christ in a new way. And as will those who will convalidate their current civil marriages. They will celebrate the sacrament of marriage. And in all of these sacraments, we always encounter Christ in new ways. He pours forth his love for us. And the reason he pours it is so that we can go where we have never been. Today, we congratulate them, their sponsors, their families. We're very proud of them. And we pray that as we witness this beautiful event about to take place, that all of us are renewed in our understanding of Christ's mercy and in our willingness to be led by Christ where we have never been to before. So that all the more, we can live out the words of that response, so that all the more we may indeed rejoice and be glad. And I will now ask Deacon Jose to call forth the candidates that are to be confirmed.